Thank you very much. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, when we look at people in our party who have served it for an awfully long time, with dignity, with tenacity, with just undoubted loyalty, there are few people that can hold the level of our next speaker. Now, I've been asked, and it's a very difficult request, but I have been asked by Stuart Agnew, and this is apparently a standard request he makes at conference, please do not clap him during his speech. He wants you to give your hands a rest and to save them for rapturous applause instead at the end of his speech. Ladies and gentlemen, we can give him a round of applause now to welcome him on stage, Stuart Agnew.
Good, I hope the mic is working. Yes, it is. I'm going to take you on my agri-Brexit journey, all right? That started 15 years ago when I was asked to go and join a debate in the NFU Council. And in those days, I was the Norfolk delegate to the NFU Council. And Ben Gill, the president, had said, I think we ought to have a debate every now and again, a formal one. And for the very first debate was, we think we should join the euro. He needed somebody to oppose that. And you might think that everyone would jump up. Not in those days, and certainly not in farming circles. But I said I would walk into the bear pit. I'd never done a debate before. He said, well, I'll tell you what the rules are. So up we went. We had a debate. I was thrashed by 56 votes to 11. But it was all great fun. And I knew I'd be beaten. And it was a useful experience. And I thought, well, that will be that. But it wasn't. Because back home in Norfolk, a lot of Norfolk farmers were most unhappy that their delegate had dared oppose the euro. And when I was up for re-election, because it was an elected position, they found a candidate to stand against me, a worthy candidate to stand against me. So I thought, I like this job, but I'm not going to compromise what I believe. I've been a member of UKIP for some time. I'm going to make it quite clear I oppose the euro. I had to get 20 nominations from 20 Norfolk farmers. I approached farmers and said, look, will you support me again? But I do not like the euro. I don't want you to be under any misapprehension. One or two said, well, okay, Stuart, we like you, but we rather like the euro as well. We like the euro more than you, so we're not going to hurt it. Anyway, I got the 20 nominations. Then one had to think about the election address, 150 words that went out with the ballot paper. So I had 50 words on my farming enterprise, 50 words of what I've been doing with the National Farmers Union, and a 50-word rant against the euro. Why not? And that went on the ballot paper. A lot of my friends said, oh, that's a suicide note, Stuart. What do you do that for? You know, you didn't have to be that up front. I easily won the competition, the ballot. And that meant that I was in a really strong position from thereafter. I wasn't opposed, and I had a mandate to talk against the euro. Now, 2 or 3 years later, I was a candidate for UKIP 2005 in the general election. That campaign happened to coincide with the NFU council meeting. And there were Norfolk farmers who said, no, Stuart Agnew shouldn't go. He's a candidate. He shouldn't be going up to a council meeting. And there was a big row about it. And in the end, I thought, well, I'm going to milk this for a sympathy vote. And I went around telling everybody I'd been banned from the NFU council meeting because I stood for UKIP and all the rest of it. And that actually gained me a bit of kudos. So we then move on to a surprise invitation I got to speak at the Oxford Farming Conference. Now, that may mean nothing to you, but that is the premier event in farming. It takes place in Oxford University while the students are still on vacation in early January. We take over a couple of colleges and a lot of the lecture rooms, etc. The first morning is the big part of it. I'll just let you know that everybody who thinks they're important in farming and all the allied industries, etc., go to the Oxford Farming Conference. If you think you're important in any way connected with agriculture, you go there. It's the place to be seen, like smart people at Ascot. And the first morning is the big morning where you have the EU Commissioner speaking, Secretary of State for Agriculture speaks, ministers, opposition spokesmen, ministers of agriculture from other countries, and sometimes even royalty. Well, I wasn't asked to that. And then in the afternoon, there are more technical discussions from suppliers and retailers. Then in the evening, we all go to the Oxford Union Debating Chamber, and that's where I'd asked to be involved. I was asked, would I propose the motion, this House believes that agriculture would thrive outside the EU? Well, that looked to be a pretty tough one. I was really nervous, really worried about doing this in front of an audience like that. But with the help of Tony Brown, who helped me write my speech, I was allocated a seconder from the Young Farmers Club, Millie Wasty. We had some practice in the Farmers Club, we took this really seriously. I knew I'd be beaten, but by God, I was going to put up a fight. We went into that debating chamber. They had a straw poll right at the beginning. I got between 10 and 20% support. Oh, well, this can only get better. Anyway, we gave that the full welly, and we won the debate. We actually won the debate. That was seismic, not just for me personally, but from that moment on, you couldn't say, well, all farmers think the EU's wonderful, they're never going to leave the CAP, etc., etc., etc. It broke the mould. Some people said, oh, that was just a one-off. They quite liked Stuart Agnew. It never happened again. A year later, I went to Belfast to do a similar debate, taking place in the Stormont Parliament, and I won that one as well. So they couldn't say Oxford was a one-off, and that set up a tone or a movement in farming that we didn't have to be tied to the EU. There were feelings within the industry we could actually survive and thrive without it. Now, that had built up this platform, and I think that was important, because I was asked back to Oxford again, beginning of 2015, this time to speak on that first morning. I mean, what an honour. 15, 20 years ago, and if somebody said you'll be doing that, look at that pig flying over there. It wouldn't have happened. I got the chance to outline UKIP's policy for the general election, had a 20-minute speech. That went okay. As you know, we lost the general election, and I forgot about it. Several months later, I met a relative of mine who's an agricultural student. He said, oh, Stuart, I liked your Oxford speech. And I said, but you didn't go there. You couldn't have afforded a ticket to go there. He said, no, I didn't go there. But our agricultural lecturer gives us a link to your speech, and he says, we must watch it. So my head gets bigger and bigger, doesn't it? Well, then, that was all before the referendum campaign. But the referendum campaign for me started proper in November last year. That was the first of 26 specialised agricultural debates I was involved in, against some pretty big names sometimes, and around the country, and sometimes in media studios with a big audience. Well, I got into them, obviously, but I realised that the NFU were asking my UKIP colleagues to speak in debates about Brexit. And they might be up against Tory MPs or MEPs who knew a lot about farming. And I really worried about this. And I sent out altogether 3 lots of briefing papers, picking up on my own experience. I was doing these debates, hoping that would help them, because I was worried. I know a lot about farming, but they don't. And I must have got something right, because Farage came up to me in Brussels one day and said, oh, I like that briefing paper, Agus. Oh, thank God for that. So 2 of these 26 debates stand out in my mind. The first one happened to be in Norfolk when I was speaking away, and I was talking about food security and the problem of us importing more and more food, and the real worry of terrorist activity at our main importing docks. And while I was speaking, there was a young man in the audience there starting to smirk condescendingly. That really irritated me, and I called him out, and I said, young man, you wouldn't smirk if you'd had the experience of terrorism I had when I was your age. That wiped the smirk off his face, but I made an enemy forever, probably. 5 days later, a bomb went off in Brussels, 500 yards from where I was sitting. It was only about 300 yards away from the NFU office in Brussels. Whenever I spoke about terrorism, etc., after that, nobody smirked. Now, the second one that stands out in my mind is the one I did in Wales. And I was up against no less than the Commissioner for Agriculture, Phil Hogan, an Irishman, native English speaker, obviously, and come from a farming background in Ireland. Difficult for me to oppose him. He was my opponent there. And the place was packed, full of media too. It literally was standing room only. And I said right at the beginning, well, Commissioner, I have a perfectly good personal relationship with you, but I don't think you should be here telling us how to vote. It was a bit similar to the Obama thing. He then said, well, I've been invited. Everybody clapped. I thought, oh, I know how this is going to go. Anyway, we had the debate. I felt I managed reasonably against somebody of his stature. And he has got stature, believe that, please. And at the end of it, everyone rushed up. They all wanted to be photographed with the Commissioner, and I was rather elbowed out of the way. Well, I politely moved aside. Hogan wouldn't have anything of it. He said, Stuart's going to be in this picture. He was very much part of the debate. And that is my problem with Hogan. I'd say he always goes out of his way to be nice and pleasant to me. Quite different from his predecessor, who was a gift to me, really, a Romanian who couldn't speak English properly. And he only had to address the NFU conference for about 10 minutes, or 1 minute, and already he was doing my work for me. He very quickly lost the farmers. Now, Hogan got his back on me for saying he shouldn't be in Wales. Earlier this month, I went to an agricultural event in Cork, in Ireland. And he was there too. And as usual, he came up to me and shook hands and said, well, what are you doing, Stuart? And I said, well, I've been to Ireland twice, actually, Commissioner, since the vote. And I'm trying to persuade the Irish to follow the British out of the European Union. And he leaned forward and said into my ear quite distinctly, you mind your own effing business. But with a big grin on his face, he then looked round, worried perhaps I might look all hurt and offended and insulted while I was just laughing. But that's Hogan. Now, where do we go on to from there? Yes, sometimes Lady Luck shines. And Lady Luck shone on me in one way during this campaign for the referendum. It became apparent that the EU might ban the herbicide glyphosate. That has been the backbone of arable farming operations ever since the mid-70s. Most farmers could not imagine life without glyphosate, particularly in British conditions. And it certainly undermined the arable farmers, the large arable farmers, who are normally absolutely pro-EU. It worried them. Lady Luck shone on me again. I got the opportunity to speak on this in Strasbourg. I got 2 minutes. That's twice as much as we normally get. About 2 or 3 minutes before I was due to give the speech in the chamber, one of our staff came running up to me, said, Haggis, Mrs. So-and-so, the MEP from Italy, she can't use her EFD minute. You've got 3 minutes now. That was wonderful. I could then relax a little bit and give a speech on glyphosate. And that went well. Evidently, it went viral, apparently, in agricultural circles, because I then went to the cereals event in Hertfordshire in June, a big outdoor event. And as I walked about, looking at the tractors and one thing and another, people were coming up to me and saying, weren't you that bloke on the video talking about glyphosate? Head gets even bigger. Then we had a proper debate and a big marquee at the cereals event. Opposing me was the NFU president and a former Minister of Agriculture. Lady Luck shone on me again. I had the very last word. And I was able to say, a vote to remain is a vote to ban glyphosate. And my opponents looked miserable. Now, we go on from there, just looking at some opportunities in agriculture, and I'm going to bang through these very quickly. I'm part of a little think tank headed up by Lord Willoughby de Brooke, one of our UKIP peers, and we are preparing a paper, which we haven't finished yet, which we're going to feed into DEFRA, and they are expecting it. There are opportunities, there's a quick list of opportunities. We can retailer agri-environmental schemes. The EU one is very complicated. Farmers are being put off doing it. We can rethink farm support schemes. I haven't met a Labour MP or a Tory MP yet who says we shouldn't support agriculture. It's just a matter of how we do it. We do not need knee-jerk reactions to pesticides from the Green Lobby where they just get banned. We do need proper field research to study the impact of what we're using on our crops on the wider environment. We've got the facilities at Rothamsted or John Innes. We should be using them. We can repatriate the organic farming rules. The EU are taking a very, very purist approach to this, which is going to make life impossible for organic farmers. We should start at the other end and look at the consumers of organic food and say, well, look, how flexible do you want to be? Because if we go down the EU route, you probably won't get organic food. It's going to be too difficult. And this feeds into food labelling. We now have the opportunity to label our food the way we want. And that will really make the dairy farmers happy or irritated by the fact that so much Irish milk they feel is being labelled as British one way or the other. Public sector procurement, you may or may not know that we have to put this out to tender across the EU. Well, what a wonderful opportunity now to say to hospitals and prisons, well, why not source locally? And who knows, patients may recover a little bit quicker with good, wholesome local food. And who knows, prisoners may get back onto the path of true righteousness a little bit faster, eating some good, wholesome food. Deregulation, this is such a huge area. Obviously, all the rules will have to stay. We're going to have to start to have a look at them, though. Some obvious ones are identification of sheep, the compulsory electronic one, it doesn't work. The whole business around asbestos cement, the chrysotile, the burial of fallen stock. I'm banging through these very fast. I'm aware of that because of time. How much time have I got?
2 minutes.
Right. Foot and mouth. We can go back to Lord Northumberland's report. He told us how we should sort this out. We weren't allowed to use his report in 2001, and we had to burn all these carcasses, which made the thing a whole lot worse. Now, this is my village of Hellhout, this is the main street through it. Look at that very closely. 2 weeks after the Brexit result, Brendan, who lives in that house, commissioned an artist to put that up there. And note, please, that one of the stars has been removed as a falling teardrop. Well, Huge interest in the media, and of course they learned I lived in the parish. They were all over me. Oh no, aren't you really upset about this? Don't you want it taken down? I said, no, every time I drive past that, I'm reminded of my success. And some of you may remember a singer in the 1960s called Dale Shannon. I'm not going to sing his song, There Are Two Types of Teardrops, but he said, there is one for sorrow and there's one for joy. Thank you very much.